Greetings. My name is Scott Lanyon, and I'm Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Education at the University of Minnesota. Minnesota administered the gradSERU in 2017, 2019, and the 2021 survey is currently underway. Today, I want to share with you what we've learned as a graduate school about getting the campus to make use of gradSERU results generally and to improve program climate specifically. The graduate school's highest priority is increasing the diversity of students receiving graduate degrees. Central to that effort has been gaining an understanding of how students perceive the climate of their own graduate program, and then promoting actions to improve program climate. gradSERU is an important tool in this effort. We've administered gradSERU, made those results available via Tableau dashboards, and then we've communicated to the entire grad ed community who has access to those dashboards, which is graduate students, faculty, and staff involved in grad ed. We've communicated to them the availability of the dashboards, and we've given them some training in their use, all in the hope that this will help lead programs to make changes to improve program climate. Graduate school staff started using the dashboards immediately. We're heavy users. An unanticipated use was that the way in which I've been able to use the gradSERU results to help the president's office and the provost's office to interpret the things that they're hearing from graduate student organizations and from individual graduate students. For example, when they hear complaints from students that the climate of their program is really unwelcoming, it's helpful to have data such as those I show here, demonstrating that generally students are positive about the climate of their program. Now, that's not to say that the president and provost ignore the complaints, but they understand the scope of the problem. Now, as I say, the graduate school staff have been heavy users, but initial use by colleges and by programs has been sporadic. Basically, what we've learned is that the dashboards themselves weren't enough. The graduate education community consists of a diversity of elements, and we need a strategy to engage each. Each of these audiences has different motivations and different preferences in how they receive information. Today, I'll introduce you to some of the distinct ways in which we are sharing gradSERU information. The first key audience are collegiate leaders. I meet with the dean and the graduate associate dean of each college once a year. gradSERU results have figured prominently in all those meetings. I certainly encourage them to use the dashboards, but we know they're busy people. So we hit on the idea of showing them for each of their graduate programs the questions for which the program is a negative outlier relative to the rest of the institution. So in this slide, I show results from 5 graduate programs within a college. Only the climate questions for which the program is a negative outlier with respect to the institution are shown. Now, I'm not making any judgment about whether being a negative outlier on a question is a bad thing. That's for the colleges to decide. I'm simply using this outlier approach to focus their attention, to encourage them to use the report to identify the areas that are of concern to them, and then to make plans with the program for addressing those concerns. The dashboards that we made available to the broader campus have a minimum cell size of 5. However, there are a series of questions asking students whether they experienced or witnessed intimidating, hostile, or offensive behavior based on their identity group, or unwanted sexual attention, sexual advances, sexual comments, or sexual touching. We felt that even with a minimum cell size of 5, reporting these results at the program level would still pose too much of a risk to students. So our plan is to share those results at the college level, not at the level of individual graduate programs. However, we did want the Title IX office to be paying attention to this data, so we provided that office with much more detailed information so that they were aware of all the programs for which there was even one respondent on gradSERU who indicated that they'd experienced or witnessed such behaviors. I then invited a representative of the Title IX office to join me in my annual meeting with the collegiate deans and grad associate deans to talk with them about these specific gradSERU results in their college. Subsequently, we worked with the college to arrange for a staff member from the Office of Equity and Diversity to visit with those programs, where at least one respondent had indicated that they had experienced unwanted sexual attention, sexual advances, sexual comments, or sexual touching, with the goal that this staff could work with the program to identify the problem, work with them to identify ways in which they could go forward to improve the situation. Some directors of graduate studies, the faculty members who oversee graduate programs, were very excited to explore the gradSERU dashboards. However, many DGSs found the dashboards to be too complex, and we really wanted to make sure we were getting DGSs to really engage with the data. So we tried to find a different way to serve them, and so we actually went a little old school. We gave them the ability to produce a PDF that would summarize, would collect all the data for their program from across all the gradSERU questions. And many DGSs found this to be much more useful for them. And indeed, many of the staff associated with graduate programs, the graduate program coordinators, really are using these PDF versions of the results. Another key audience is, of course, the graduate students themselves. We tried an experiment where we worked with students, graduate students from a single program. We divided them up into small groups and assigned each group different sets of questions from gradSERU. Obviously climate, since that's what I'm talking about today, but also, the advising questions, research experiences, teaching experiences, and so on. We asked them to use the jitter plots that are present on this slide to identify all the questions for which their program was a negative outlier, or where student responses were simply more negative than they thought they should be for the program. We then asked them to use the bar chart approach to visualizing the data to identify questions for which different identity groups in their program, different subpopulations, had very different responses. Then, using the results from these two sort of exercises, we had them identify the questions they wanted the faculty to pay close attention to. In an hour, they had looked at all the gradSERU questions and had prioritized the ones that identified areas most in need of improvement. To help improve program climate, the Graduate School's Diversity Office provides program consultations. Of late, the Diversity Office staff have found that producing heat maps such as this really helps them to get a quick sense of a program's climate. In this table, each row is a different graduate program. The columns are different gradSERU climate questions, and the cells that are filled brown indicate questions for which the program's responses represent a negative outlier with respect to the campus. Staff consult this gradSERU climate heat map before deciding how to approach the consultation. The final audience that I want to talk about today, or the final potential consumer of gradSERU results, are the external committees we assemble to evaluate our academic programs. Every 10 years, our departments and their associated graduate programs are the subject of an external review. And we're in the process now of deciding what role gradSERU results should play in those reviews. We're considering a number of options. The most obvious would be simply to provide members of the external review committees with access to gradSERU dashboards. I'm skeptical that that will work. It takes a while to learn how to use those dashboards well. We might encourage the graduate students of programs under review to go through a similar gradSERU exercise as I just described and include their priorities in the department's self-study. And lastly, the graduate school staff might examine gradSERU results for the program and look for things that concern us and to pose questions of the external review committee based on that examination. Changing program climate really comes down to changing culture, which is difficult. We need many different audiences to be engaged in the effort if we are to be successful. Unfortunately, those audiences have very different motivations and needs. Our job is to figure out how to provide each audience with the gradSERU information they need in a manner that is most useful to them. Thank you.